Mom looked me in the eyes and said, "You're a failure, just like your dad." I didn't argue. I packed my bags and left. 2 weeks later, she showed up crying at my door. She said it like it was nothing. Like she was handing me the weather forecast. "You're a failure. Just like your dad." The room went quiet. I remember the tick of the kitchen clock behind her, the faint hum of the refrigerator, and my fingers going numb around the edge of the table. She didn't shout it. There wasn't any dramatic anger or emotion behind the words, just cold, surgical precision. Like she was cutting something out of me she'd been meaning to remove for years. I didn't argue. I just stared at her. And she stared back like she was waiting for me to explode, cry, plead, something. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. I nodded, stood up, walked to my room, and started packing. I didn't rush, didn't slam a single door. Just gathered my things quietly, like I'd been planning this for years and finally got the green light. And maybe I had. You see, that sentence, it was just the final cut in a long, slow bleed. My whole life had been leading to that moment. After my dad left, or got pushed out, depending on who you asked, my mom never stopped punishing me for his absence. I became his shadow, the punching bag she could still reach. If I forgot to mow the lawn, I was lazy like your father. If I got a B instead of an A, it was typical. Just like him, can't follow through. Every misstep, every shortcoming, somehow belonged to him, and by extension, to me. He wasn't around to defend himself. So she made sure I carried the weight alone. But I tried. God, I tried. I got a job when I was 16. Stocking shelves at a discount store after school, giving her every dime I didn't need for lunch or gas. I stayed out of trouble. Didn't drink, didn't party, didn't run with the wrong crowd. I came home early, respected curfew, cleaned up after myself. When I turned 21 and still lived under her roof, I paid rent, on time, every month, more than she asked for. It was never enough. She never said thank you. Never smiled when I brought home groceries or fixed the fence or helped her with the bills. She only looked at me with those tired, disappointed eyes. The same look you give a car that never quite starts right, no matter how many times you take it to the shop. And then came that night, the last night. It wasn't even a fight. We were talking about something stupid. I think I forgot to pick up toilet paper. And somehow, that spiraled into everything I'd ever done wrong. The noise I made, the money I cost, the space I took up. Then the line. That final judgment. Her closing argument. Just like your dad. She didn't even know I'd packed my bags until I was by the front door. "Where do you think you're going?" she asked, crossing her arms like she still had some hold on me. I turned, and for the first time in my life, I didn't flinch when I looked her in the eye. "Out," I said. "And I'm not coming back." Then I walked out, and didn't look back, not even when she called my name. That was 2 weeks ago. And now? Now I wake up in a place that smells like fresh paint and new beginnings. It's small, sure, and the walls still echo a little when I talk, but it's mine. I've got a job where my boss actually says, "Good work," when I finish a project. I've got food in the fridge I pay for with my own check. I've got peace. Or at least I did. Until yesterday afternoon, when someone buzzed my apartment from downstairs. And I looked through the peephole to see my mother. Crying. She was standing there like a statue that had cracked open, puffy eyes, wind-chapped cheeks, her hair pulled back in the same tired bun she always wore when she was overwhelmed. She hadn't seen me yet. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides like she was holding something in, grief, regret, maybe just the cold. I didn't open the door. Not right away. I watched her through the peephole, part of me numb, the other part vibrating with questions. Why was she here? What did she want now? Was it more blame? Another lecture? Or worse, some desperate attempt to reel me back in with a meal and a forced apology? She lifted her hand and knocked again, softer this time. "Evan," she said, just loud enough that I could hear. "Please. Just open the door." The sound of her voice stirred something in me, but not in the way she might have hoped. It wasn't sympathy. It was a dull, buried ache. The kind of feeling that sits in the back of your ribs and reminds you of everything you swallowed down to keep the peace. I cracked the door open but left the chain on. She blinked when she saw me. Her lips parted like she had a whole speech ready, but then nothing came out. Just a shaky breath. "Can I come in?" she asked. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no either. I just looked at her. Not with hate. Not even anger. Just calm. And I said, "Why are you here?" She flinched like the question hit her harder than any insult I could have thrown. "I wanted to talk," she said finally, eyes darting to the floor like she couldn't bear to hold my gaze. "I didn't mean what I said. I didn't unhook the chain." "You didn't mean which part?" I asked. "That I'm a failure, or that I'm just like Dad." She didn't answer right away. Just looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, like the words she'd flung so carelessly had somehow boomeranged and cracked her from the inside. "It was the heat of the moment," she whispered. "No," I said, leaning my head against the doorframe. "That wasn't heat. That was ice. You knew exactly what you were saying." Her mouth trembled. "I've been going through a lot. I was angry. Scared. I know," I cut in. "You've always been scared. That's not new." That stopped her. I could tell she didn't expect me to talk back, not like this. Not with this calm. This control. And maybe that's what finally made her cry. She pressed her hand to her mouth like she could hold it all in, but the tears came anyway, wet, raw, years too late. "I didn't know you'd leave," she said. "I didn't think you'd just go." I stared at her. "You told me I was nothing," I said quietly. "You made it pretty easy." She started to say something, some excuse, some plea, but I shut the door gently, chains still latched. I needed a moment. Because hearing her cry? It didn't break me. It just confirmed something I'd never admitted before. I had finally stepped out of her shadow. I stood behind the door for a long moment, listening to nothing but the hum of the hallway and the echo of her sobs slowly fading. Then I unlatched the chain. Not because I was ready to forgive her, but because I needed to say what had lived in my chest for 27 years. She sat down at my small kitchen table like it was a courtroom bench, hands folded, shoulders curled inward. I didn't offer her tea. I didn't ask if she was okay. I just pulled out the chair across from her and sat her. "This isn't going to be one of those movie scenes," I said, "where you cry and I melt, and we hug and go back to how it was." She wiped her face with the sleeve of her coat, nodding like she understood. But I wasn't sure she did. "I need you to hear this," I continued, "because I've waited my entire life to say it." She looked up then. Braced herself. "You raised me like I was already broken," I said. "Every mistake I made was proof I was turning into him. Every good thing I did was met with silence, because it still wasn't enough." Her lips parted, but I held up a hand. "No. Let me finish." She nodded again, quieter this time. "Still. I spent years trying to unearn your disappointment," I said. "Like if I worked hard enough, gave enough, stayed small enough, you'd finally see me as something other than his echo." I paused. Let it land. "But the truth is, I'm not him. And I never was." There it was. The truth. Simple. Clear. Finally spoken. She blinked, stunned. And for the first time in my life, I saw it in her eyes, not anger, not control, not even guilt. Just fear. She was afraid of what came next. I was, too. But I knew this much. I wasn't the boy she raised anymore. I was the man she couldn't break. She didn't speak right away. Just looked at me with this strange mix of guilt and defensiveness, like she couldn't decide if she wanted to apologize or argue. Finally she said, "I didn't know how else to raise you. After your father left, I was alone. I was angry. I didn't want to get hurt again." I nodded. "So you made me your shield." "What?" "You used me to block the pain. Every time life didn't go your way, you reminded yourself I was just like him. That made it easier, didn't it? To keep hating." "That's not fair," she whispered. "Isn't it?" I leaned forward. You never got therapy. Never healed. You just funneled it into me. She looked down at the table, silent. Do you even remember the first time you said I was like him? She shook her head. I do. I was 9. I missed a spelling word. Careless, you said. Just like your father. She covered her face then, not crying, but hiding. I needed a mother, I said. Not a judge. Not a jailer. Just a mom. Silence. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping softly across the tile. I'm not angry anymore, I told her. Not like I used to be. She looked up, eyes wide, hopeful. But I wasn't done. I just don't need you to be proud of me anymore. That, I think, hurt worse than anything I'd said. Because for once, I wasn't asking for her approval. I was giving her the truth. And walking away from the need to be chosen. She opened her mouth, maybe to deny it, maybe to explain, but nothing came out. Just silence, broken by the tick of my kitchen clock. She looked so small, sitting there in that chair. Not the woman who used to tower over me with sharp words and sharper silences. Not the woman who could freeze a room with a sigh or make me feel 2 inches tall with one sentence. Just a tired, aging person who realized too late that some bridges don't burn. They collapse slowly, over years, beam by beam. I never wanted it to be this way, she finally said. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. What did you want it to be? She blinked, like she hadn't thought about it in years. I wanted you to turn out okay. To be strong. To not need anyone. I gave a dry laugh. Well, congratulations. I don't. She winced. That's not what I meant. It's what you taught me. I turned and opened the cabinet, pulled down a glass, filled it with water. Just something to do. Something to quiet the shaking I still carried in my ribs, even now. She watched me, hands clenched in her lap. I wasn't ready to be alone, she said. When your father left, I was scared. I didn't know how to love you without being afraid you'd leave, too. I paused, back still to her. But I didn't leave, I said. Not until you made it impossible to stay. That silence came back, thick as smoke. She didn't argue. For the first time in my life, she didn't argue. She just whispered, I'm sorry. And for the first time in her life, I think she meant it. But the thing about apologies? Sometimes they arrive too late to matter. I didn't rush to respond. Let her words hang there, fragile and trembling. She waited, maybe expecting me to say I forgive you. Maybe hoping for some crack in my voice, something soft. But I didn't give her that. Because I'd already done all the forgiving I needed to do, for myself. I'm not angry with you, I said, and it was true. Not anymore. She looked up quickly, like that was a gift she didn't deserve. But that doesn't mean I want you in my life. She froze. You can't spend decades tearing someone down and expect them to hold the door open just because you finally said sorry. Her lips parted, but I held up my hand again. Let me finish. She lowered her head like a school kid being scolded. I'm proud of who I've become, I told her. But not because of you. In spite of you. I stepped closer to the table, not to intimidate, just to be clear. You showed me what cold looks like. What silence feels like. What it means to carry someone's pain when they won't carry their own. And yeah, it almost broke me. She was crying again. But this time I didn't feel like comforting her. That wasn't my job anymore. But I built something from that rubble. Peace. Dignity. A place that doesn't echo with your disappointment. I walked to the door, opened it gently. I hope you find whatever you came looking for, I said. And she just sat there. Because what she wanted wasn't mine to give. She didn't move. Just sat at the table, staring at the floor like she was trying to undo time by sheer force of thought. Like if she stayed long enough, I'd cave. That the son she knew, the quiet, apologetic boy always trying to earn a scrap of kindness, might still be hiding somewhere inside me. But I wasn't him anymore. You can't stay, I said, this time more gently. Not out of cruelty. Just honesty. She looked up, wet eyes blinking. Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. Home. A friend's. Anywhere but here. She stood slowly, her hands trembling as she adjusted the sleeves of her coat. She wasn't crying anymore. Just stunned. Hollow. Like she had finally felt the full weight of what she'd lost. I never thought it would be like this, she said softly. You and me. I nodded. Me neither. She moved toward the door but paused at the threshold, one hand resting on the frame. I used to worry, she whispered, that you'd become like your father. That you'd leave when I needed you most. I met her gaze. You pushed me until I didn't have a choice. That truth hit her harder than any raised voice ever could. She turned her head slightly, like she wanted to say something else, something redemptive, but nothing came. Because there was nothing left to say. She stepped out into the hallway. I watched her shoulders rise and fall once, then still. Then she turned, her voice brittle but clear. If I had said this sooner, really said it, would it have mattered? I thought about that. Really thought. Maybe, I said. But that version of me? The one who waited? He's gone. She closed her eyes. Just for a moment. And when she opened them, there was no more fight. No more bargaining. Just the quiet resignation of someone who had finally run out of chances. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say goodbye. I simply closed it. Not in anger. Not to punish her. But to free myself. Because sometimes peace doesn't come from being heard or understood. It comes from walking away and knowing you finally chose you. The click of the door was quiet. No bang. No dramatic pause. Just the soft sound of a boundary being set, and this time, not one she could step over. I stood there for a long while after she left, palms still resting on the knob. My reflection in the peephole stared back at me, hollow, tired, maybe a little shaky. But also calm. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like relief. Like when you finally walk out of a burning building and only then realize how long you'd been inhaling smoke. For years I'd mistaken endurance for love. I thought if I just held on long enough, stayed silent long enough, good enough, she'd meet me in the middle. That she'd say, I see you. I'm proud of you. And maybe, somewhere deep down, I thought it would heal the part of me that still hurt when I heard the word, Dad. But that never came. Instead, I had learned to translate her indifference, to find affection in empty words and backhanded praise. I'd hear her say, At least you're not in jail. And twist it into a compliment. You always were too sensitive. Became a badge I wore quietly, trying to prove I wasn't. I didn't realize how much I had shrunk just to survive. Until I left. Until I sat in a room I paid for, put food in a fridge I stocked, turned the key in a door no one else had a copy to, and didn't have to brace for criticism when I walked in. That was freedom. Not fireworks. Not some dramatic shift. Just quiet. Stillness. And breath. The first night I moved out, I slept on a mattress on the floor with 2 suitcases stacked at the foot. No curtains. No couch. Just walls and silence. But I smiled when I woke up. Because the quiet wasn't threatening anymore. It was mine. In the days that followed, I started building something. Piece by piece. A cheap coffee table from a second-hand store. A bookshelf I assembled with a rubber mallet and a YouTube tutorial. A rug that didn't match anything, but felt warm beneath my feet. At work, I showed up early. Stayed late. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. My manager, Keith, a guy who rarely says more than a few words, stopped me in the hallway after a week and said, Hey, good work on the logistics board. That was sharp. That 2-second moment felt like a gallon of water after years in a desert. And the thing is, I didn't even need it. Because for the first time, I believed it myself. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't careless. I wasn't my father. I was me. And I was finally proud of that. But that pride came with a strange, quiet grief too, the kind no one tells you about. Because when you finally grow beyond the need for someone's love, it doesn't erase the part of you that once needed it so badly. I still had moments. standing in the kitchen with a chipped mug, wondering if she was home safe. If she was replaying everything in her head. If she regretted what she'd said, or just regretted losing control. But I never called. Never texted. Because healing meant not rushing to fix what someone else had broken. It meant letting people carry the weight of their own choices. And it meant I no longer had to be the one holding both sides of the rope in a tug-of-war she started years ago. I didn't win. She didn't lose. But I was free. And that was more than enough. 3 weeks passed. Then a month. No calls. No texts. Just silence. And you'd think that would bring peace. You'd think I'd breathe easier every time I looked at my phone and saw nothing from her. But silence has layers. It echoes things you haven't quite made peace with. Still, I let it be. I didn't chase it. I didn't test it. I honored it. Until one Sunday afternoon, I came back from the laundromat to find a manila envelope waiting in front of my apartment door. No return address. Just my name written in familiar, looping handwriting I hadn't seen in years, not since report cards and permission slips. I carried it inside, placed it on the counter, and stared at it for 20 minutes before I even opened it. Inside, one folded letter. No pictures. No trinkets. Just a single sheet of lined paper, written in the same blue ink she used for grocery lists on the fridge when I was a kid. Evan. I don't know what to say anymore. So I'll just tell the truth. I was wrong. I'd been wrong for a long time. I let my fear turn into control. I let my disappointment, not in you, but in myself, get passed down like a bad inheritance. You didn't deserve it. You were always good. You were always trying. And I was too angry to see it. You may never forgive me. I might not even deserve to be forgiven. But I want you to know, no matter what you decide, I'm proud of the man you became. I didn't raise you to be kind. You chose to be. I didn't teach you strength. You forged it. I didn't love you the way I should have. But I hope you find someone who does. Love. Mom. My hands didn't shake. My eyes didn't well up. I read the letter once. Then again. And then I placed it in the back of a drawer. Not out of bitterness, but because that chapter didn't need to be read a third time. I didn't reply. I didn't reach out. That letter wasn't a bridge, it was a gravestone. A quiet marking of what had been buried between us. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to make her pay. My revenge was simpler. Smaller. Quiet. It was in the early mornings when I made coffee and didn't feel dread sitting beside me at the table. It was in the way I decorated my apartment, messy, mismatched, entirely mine. A plant I forgot to water. A lamp I hated but kept anyway. A chipped mug that didn't belong to anybody but me. It was in the friendships I rebuilt, ones I let go of when I was too tired from trying to please someone who saw me as a reflection of their own pain. It was in the first time I laughed at a joke and didn't feel the need to glance sideways for approval. It was in every small, sacred moment I chose me, again and again. Dignity isn't loud. It doesn't kick the door open or leave flaming words behind. It walks away. It locks the door behind it. And it rests. I stood at my window that evening, watching the streetlights flicker on across the block. Somewhere out there, she still lived. Still existed. But for the first time in my life, her presence, or absence, didn't define mine. I wasn't the boy she raised to survive in a war zone of her own making. I was the man who left. The man who built piece from pieces. And as I turned away from the window and clicked off the light, I whispered something I hadn't said aloud until then. I forgive you. But I love me more. Then I sat down in silence. And for once, it was good. It was mine. And it was enough. Forever.